Hi. Um, Today I'm going to deconstruct how I did this project. This project is about recreating um, a master painter's image. And in this case, I decided to do Rene Magritte, The Lovers. And we have talked a little bit about um, how painters throughout history, it's always been traditional. They create stories. Painters create stories. That's what they do from the beginning of time on cave dwellers. That's what they did. They created stories as soon as they took up a brush. And so for fictional images, that's exactly what we're trying to do, except that we are creating the scene, and painters do create the scene. Whereas, say, for instance, photojournalists, they tell stories, but it's because they have happened upon those stories. As fictional photographers, we tell stories much more like a painter does, in that we set up the scene and everything that's in that scene is under our control. So for this image, I did decide to go with a surrealist painter. I love Rene Magritte, and we've talked about surrealism in fictional photography and how it relates to fictional photography. I don't think we've looked at this particular image, but we have looked at some others by him. Um, and of course, we know surrealistic painters and writers, they dealt with the subconscious and symbolism. And so in this picture, which this is actually my image, so let's look at the actual painting. Um, he's got these two lovers, and how being veiled like that, there's maybe, to symbolize maybe a problem with communication, or how we hold things back sometimes in a relationship and can't really connect. The connection is veiled. And I just thought this was lovely. Plus, I thought it's going to be fairly simple to recreate. It only has a couple of main elements. It has the couple, and they have these white things on their heads. And then we have this corner of a room with a crown molding. The colors relate to each other. I love this blue and kind of pinky maroon color. I thought were beautiful, and beige up here, and then white. So I thought it would be fairly simple to recreate. And so what I ended up doing was used my daughter and her boyfriend at the time, and they I stuck a pillowcase on her head, and this is a tea towel, and put them up against a white background, because I knew I would be cutting them out of the background again. So I tried to make it as plain as I could. Again, you must be conscious of the light. So when I looked at my image here, I saw that most of the light was coming from this side. There were shadows on this side, light and shadows. So that's what I was looking at, excuse me, in my placement with this image. I had a window in front and to the side of them on this wall over here. And it did give me enough. I knew that there was light. I could see contrast in there, the folds of the cloth, and that it was darker on this side, lighter on this side, and that's what I was really looking for. So I used that image. Let's take a look here, and this is my image. Turn all this stuff off. And I used a pen tool to cut them out. And this was what I started with. The first thing I did, of course, was liquefy. So I knew that I needed that. She had a lot of excess stuff there. So I used the liquefy tool to, it is a smart object. So you always want to use liquefy. You want to have a smart object, and come up to filter, liquefy. And just tucked in, I used the push tool to tuck in this side in particular, and maybe a little bit over here. I think I moved him in a little here. Didn't have to do a whole lot there, because I knew I would be cutting out these little rough pointy edges. That was not a problem. And so I used the pen tool, and just quickly cut around them. And this added once you do that and you make it a selection, then all you need to do is add a mask down here with this icon, and the selected area will already be masked out. And that's what I have here. So the next thing I knew I needed to do was I wanted to emphasize the light and dark. This on the painting, it's very contrasty. These are very deep darks in here and very bright whites up here. So I knew I would need to do that. And I did keep a picture. I got rid of it since then, or I actually moved it to reference as I was working. So I did keep this picture here underneath as I was working. And I used two kinds of dodging and burning. So I did a 50% gray. Oh, the first thing I did was I healed and cloned the wrinkles out. So, and that's simply done with the healing brush tool and the clone stamp tool. And after that, then I dodged and burned. And I used the 50% gray layer. I think I had it on soft light, but I'll show you how to do that. And it's just instead of using two layers of curves, you can do your light and dark all on one layer. And so sometimes it's kind of, especially if you're doing something just quickly, it's a good way to do it. And I ended up using it for this. You can kind of see the light and dark in there on there. It's kind of cool. I'll show you how I do that. I'll do it on here. Okay, let's get rid of that. So to do a 50% gray layer, you come down to the add a new layer icon, and you hit Option, and then you click on Add a new layer. When you do that, it will bring up a new layer dialog. And you'll see here this sentence, it says no neutral color. When the blend mode is normal, it will not be lit up and you can't check it off. But when you change it to overlay or soft light, in this case for demonstration, I'm going to use overlay. When you change it to overlay or soft light, you can check it off and it'll say fill with overlay or fill with soft light, 50% gray. So you know you have the right thing. And when you do that, just hit OK. I'm going to use overlay for demonstration purposes, although, you know, with blend modes, they work the same. Overlay is a little more aggressive and darker, and then soft light is a little more subtle. But in this case, I'm going to use overlay so I can show you. So when you have your 50% gray layer, oh, the other way you can there's two ways to make 50% gray. That's probably the easiest way, but another way is to simply make a blank layer, come over here to your foreground and background swatches, and then if you put in 808080, it will give you a 50% gray, or you can put in 128, 128, and 128 in RGB. 128, of course, is halfway between 0 and 255, 0 being black and 255 being absolute white. Either way is fine. And then hit OK. And then you can hit Option Delete and it'll fill with 50% gray. So either way is good. Once you have that, you can come over and get a soft round brush and come over to your color swatches and make sure that they are black and white. And to get black and white from here, you can either click this little thing here, or you can hit D on your keyboard and it will also turn it back to the default black and white. And then use X to toggle between the foreground and background colors. So I'm going to start with white, and with that, I have it on white. You're going to want to set your flow. If you're using a mouse, probably set it down to like 1 or 2, maybe 3. And if you're using a pressure sensitive pen, you can maybe set it to 5 or 6. But I'm using a mouse right now, so I'm going to set it on 3 here. You'll be able to see what I'm doing pretty easily. And then simply go over the areas. Now you're going to want to do just like you would normally do with the dodge and burn. You're going to dodge the white areas, the lighter areas with white, and then see how that goes. And you can see it does a pretty good job and pretty quickly there. And then all you need to do to get to the burn part of it is hit X and your foreground and background switch, and now you have black on top, and then you can simply burn those areas that are dark, go into the shadow. So it creates the contrast between the light and the dark, and it's just a really quick and simple way of doing that. And then if you need to switch back, you can switch back, come in here, and switch again to dark. So it's kind of nice. Switch back to white. It's kind of nice. It's really fast. Back to dark. You don't have to keep going between layers. And as you can see, it can do a really good job. Now, the problem is if you do too much, it's not as easy to adjust. You can take the opacity down if it's a little too heavy-handed. If you put light in the darks or you went too light, say for instance, if I made this too bright here, so that's just way too white. Well, I can switch it to black and maybe go over it to darken it again. Oops, over it to darken it again. But I feel like that's a little harder to control as opposed to using two curves where you can switch up and down. So if you were going to use curves then, and what I ended up doing was using both. So get your curves levels. There's a curve, and then I'm just going to Command J and make a copy of curves. So this one you would have as your dodge. And this one is your burn. And Command I to invert. Whoops, actually we need to do this first. For your dodge, you're just going to bring your midtones up. For your burn, you're going to bring them down. Okay, and then you invert the mask, and then you would take your brush and you would leave it on white, and you could go over your places. So say if I wanted to dodge this area here, I'm sorry, this is burning it. And that's why one layer is fun, because now I was on the wrong layer. I wanted to dodge. So I'm going to dodge this area here. And it's a nice big area. And then you have to switch layers to burn. So say if I wanted to burn this area here. And let's say dodge, you have to switch it again over here, dodge, and then go back to burn. So it's a little more tedious. It's actually, you get a little more control, I think, this way. But I ended up using both on this, on my, my image. The nice thing about this, of course, is, for instance, if your brights are too bright, you just have the one layer to deal with and you can bring it down if you need to or pop it up. So there's a little more control with the two. It's just you have to go a little slower. So what I ended up doing with my image here was I did both. I used the 50% gray layer here to do some fine work, and then I burned in areas and I dodged areas. So they worked out well. That's pretty much it. I did know I wanted to change the color of her blouse a little bit. And so I changed with, I just painted it a different color. I used a pink color on here and lightened it up a little bit. You can see it played around with the edges a little bit to change that. And then overall, I thought I wanted to bring back the colors, take them down a little bit, just desaturate. This seemed very desaturated to me. So I used a hue and saturation level and layer rather. And in my hue and saturation layer, I brought the lightness up, I took the saturation down, and I did play around with the color a little bit. I added some green into some of it. Just seemed right to me. I just used the sliders and played till I got something that I liked. Okay, now for the background, again, pretty simple. I simply used corner of my room. I'm going to turn the subject off so you can see. So this is a photograph of the corner of my room, the very dusty corner of my room, as you can see. So I started with that, and this was late afternoon maybe, doing this, and I had it on normal, just took the corner, and then I placed it over the painting so that I could get the placement and the proportions correct. And I cloned out the spots that I didn't want. I added in my crown molding, which you can see was actually just a picture of the side of my countertop, and placed it where I thought it would be, put a mask on it. And so I basically had that corner, and it looked very much like this corner. Okay. After that, I knew I needed to change the colors. So I went in and I simply got a blank layer. I went to my color swatches over here, and I picked a color that I thought was close and painted. Now, I did end up changing this to soft light. When I had it on normal, this was the color. So I knew it was kind of a raspberry red color. And I was also thinking of the maroon shirt that my daughter was wearing, my subject was wearing. So I just changed that. I ended up changing it to a soft light though, just because it blended it a little bit better. And then I did the same thing with the blue. I simply picked a blue color. Now this one I ended up with a color that I really liked. So I didn't have to change the blend mode at all. And that's it. Didn't have to do anything. I didn't do anything to the ceiling because it was already, especially once these colors were in, it was pretty beige anyways. So I was happy with that. And I'll put my subjects back in here. Basically, this is done. There wasn't a whole lot that needed to be done as far as the actual subject and background. I did think that I wanted to use some kind of texture on top. And I wanted, in the painting, the original, you can kind of see there's like these, you can see that the texture of the canvas over here and throughout the whole thing. So I thought maybe I could add a canvas texture. I wasn't able to find a texture that I really liked. So what I ended up doing, none of them were fine enough for what I needed. But I thought, well, maybe if I can just get rid of my subjects here, I can actually use this background as my texture. And that is what I ended up doing. I will show you. I used Content Aware Fill. So I got my lasso tool. And I just drew around loosely my subjects. And once I had my selection, you can go to Edit, Fill, and the contents should be on Content Aware. Sometimes it's on foreground and background, depending on whatever. If in this case you want it Content Aware Fill, and then everything else stays pretty much the same, hit OK. Wait for it. And it does a pretty great job. I mean, I thought that was really good. Then after that, I simply got a blank layer, and I think I started with, I think I just clone stamped things. So clone stamped here, down here, and went around this. And it really doesn't matter because I knew I would just, all I want is the texture. At that point then, I went ahead, I think I actually merged these. Flatten image. And then Command T to, well, I guess you need to make a copy. Command T, and then I just made it big. And that was it. This is what I used. So when I put my texture on here, this was the texture that I used. Now, as you can see, I'm going to take these off. This is this exact same texture. And it does change the color slightly because the texture that I have now is somewhat blue. So you can see the white are very white. It kind of gave it a blue tint, which now I don't mind so much, but at the time I didn't really want that. And so in order to not have that as the, I didn't want to change the colors of my original, of my backgrounds, my subject, I just wanted to keep them as they were. I decided to add and clip a black and white adjustment layer to my foreground, to the texture that I'm using. And that now made this a black and white. Like if you look at it here, it made it a black and white instead of a color. clipping it. And I did not like the way that it changed the color of her shirt here, so I just simply masked that out a little bit from that black and white layer. And after that, again, perfectly fine to stop there, but I decided that I still wanted something to make it look a little bit older. And a lot of times what I'll do with that is I'll use a paper texture, and I have this black and white paper texture that I used. And I added that, and all that is this here. Let's see if I take it. This is the paper texture. Oh, I did want to mention when I have this texture here is an overlay blend mode. You do have to change the blend mode in order to be able to see underneath it. As same with this texture is in multiply. When it first comes in, it's in normal and it looks like that. Okay. It's down a little bit, so, and multiply. So on multiply, it did darken my image in a couple of places that I didn't want. Mostly up here on the ceiling, I felt that was too dark, so I masked that part out. And that is it. So my textures were the actual original texture from the painting, which I enlarged, and I changed the blend mode to overlay. And then I added a paper texture in multiply, and that's how I got all the textures on it. And that's simply it. So that it's simple. It's not particularly hard to do. Mine is very, I think it mimics the original pretty well. I still think it has a nice modern feel to it. You can still kind of tell it's a photograph. And I really am pleased with how it turned out. For yours, like if you look at some of the other examples, I've seen a lot like the girl with the pearl. It's not one I would particularly choose because it's just a portrait. It's not really a fictional image, but take a look around, look at the COVID-19, the Getty Museum project, and see what people came up with. Some of them are really funny. Some of them are very much your own interpretation. It doesn't have to be like an exact replica, more or less what I did here. You can play around with your own symbols and all kinds of examples. If you go and look through there, it's a lot of fun. And I hope you have fun with this project. I've never done this before, but I really enjoyed doing it. It's actually one I've kind of thought of doing because I see other photographers doing these, and I hope you have fun with it. Okay, terrific. I'll talk to you later.